Hello Orchid friends, welcome back to my channel. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day, staying healthy and staying safe. Here we have a Dedrobium orchid. This one is called Burana Diamond. This orchid is one of my few Dedrobium orchids in my collection. It's a miniature Dedrobium. And what you're seeing here is its last bloom cycle of this year. So it's actually this bloom cycle's first batch of flowering. And it did really well this time. I just didn't have enough time to take its progression photos from, spikes to buds to full bloom. So here you go. This is the full bloom video. I was just too busy, so I didn't have the time to really do a good job documenting every step. But back to this orchid. It's a miniature size, which I love. However, it does not have any fragrance, which is the only downside that I think this orchid, it's kind of a pity. If it has fragrance, this orchid would be such a great orchid to have. But I still love its color. It's essentially white Dedrobium with purple heart, like purple in the center. But later you'll see this orchid actually has slight color variation when the temperature is colder. And I'll explain that when we get there. This orchid also has a couple keikis on one of the canes, but I have left them on there for years. I think there are now 3 different canes coming out of 3 keikis, but I just haven't detached them because I want these keikis to continue to grow to a point where I think they will be absolutely fine on their own, and that's what I'm gonna do. This orchid is currently in a semi-hydro setup. This orchid is one of the earlier ones that I decided to put into semi-hydro when I was trying out that method. And because this orchid just really likes semi-hydro, so I never really changed the method on this orchid. And it's still in its original pot. You can see lots of roots. So it's a great sign that this orchid is just loving semi-hydro. For those of you who are not familiar with semi-hydro, it's essentially, having the drainage hole on the sides, and then below the drainage hole area, that's where the reservoir is. And the idea is that you create that reservoir so that this orchid can continue to have water for more often, almost constantly. Now, after that, all that flowers are gone, I immediately see another flower spike coming out from an old cane that had flowered before. So this is actually new to me because I thought, just like Oncidium orchids, Dedrobium orchids, once it bloomed, it would not bloom from the same cane, and I was so very wrong. I was surprised to see that happening, but then I was like, oh gosh, yeah, after all, it's not an Oncidium, it's a Dedrobium, so it gets to do this. And I was actually just very pleasantly surprised. So the flower spike continued to grow, and I just pay close attention to how it does, and it's doing just fine. And where I put this orchid is on the south facing window sill, so it gets a lot of light exposure. As you can see here, lots of light shining through the window. It's a south facing window. So this also brings up another really interesting point, and that is, for most of my orchid, it's Phalaenopsis, and we know compared to Phalaenopsis, Dedrobium actually requires more light as well as more nutrients or fertilizer. And this is exactly what I do for this orchid, right? Putting it on a south-facing window, but then also on top of the 25% fertilizer that I provide to this orchid, along with all my other orchids, most of my other orchids, I have some slow-release fertilizer in this orchid's container. I sprinkle about maybe like 10 10 of them, sprinkle about 10 of them into the medium, on top of the medium. So as I water, I make sure the water is hitting all those slow release fertilizer every time, so that way the nutrients would then go down with the water, so the roots can take up some nutrients from there. Now, what you see here is the new spikes flower. Do you see the difference here compared to what you see at the beginning of the video? These flowers all have a little bit more purple. And the second thing I learned about this orchid is when it's colder, when temperature is colder, it would have a little bit more color, meaning the purple color will be more intensified. And when it's warmer, the flower tend to be just white around the petal and sepals and only have the purple in the center. Whereas here, you can see, I mean, the entire flower has a lot of purple, even for the petals and sepals. Obviously, the purple will fade slightly as these flowers mature, but compared to what you see earlier at the beginning of the video, this is really different. And I kind of like this variation because I was kind of tired of seeing white orchids, and now this orchid is giving me a little bit more color, so it was actually a very pleasant surprise too. Now, this is a Dedrobium phalaenopsis type Dedrobium orchid. If you have nobile type Dedrobium, those are the ones that would shed their leaves and go into dormancy in winter. When that happens, you don't need to water them as much. For this orchid though, it does not require winter rest, and therefore this orchid actually gets water, nutrients throughout the year. And I try to keep up with the watering because Dedrobium canes can store some water, and therefore every time if I just give it quarter cup, it's not enough. So usually I try to give it a quarter cup, and then during the week, like maybe the third, fourth day, if I see it's already getting a little drier, then I will give it another 1/8 cup, or use my spray bottle and just kind of spray it down, the surface area of the media. And that seems to do the trick, that this orchid can remain properly hydrated. As far as why I do the blue cup, I still get questions about that. It's really just for aesthetic reason and to block out unnecessary sunlight so that the media won't have algae forming, and that's really it. Other than that, sometimes I use it as a saucer. When I soak this orchid, then the outer cup kind of is where the water would hold. And then eventually, once it's done, I would just take the inner pot out and then let the water drain into the outer cup. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!